I think one of my biggest pieces of advice is start small. So we have it on my wall and we tell it to everybody at the company. So it's think big, start small, grow fast. A lot of what makes early businesses successful is the ability to just build what you need at the time and then be willing to go back and get rid of it and start over. And you got to think, I always think about, people or humans, the first month of a human's life, it looks very different than the second 6 months. And then after that, if you're middle-aged and you add another 6 months on, you're not going to change a lot. And that happens for businesses too. But for a small business, 6 months is night and day. And if you keep the resources proportionate to the size of the business, it's a lot easier to stay afloat. Like it's very hard to keep a business successful through the first year.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups and 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours? Just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Drea Burbank. And Drea, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing everything right, but give it my best shot. But Drea grew up on off the grid in Idaho, and grew up in what you'd call a commune. Got expelled from the community expelled her, and so left the community and went off to work as a firefighter. And then from there went to med school and became a doctor. Did well in school, but found out she wasn't necessarily suited to be the typical doctor, which I understand because I'm not the typical attorney. And so then started a med tech business and consulted with other businesses to solve their problems. So with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, you got my name right. It's Drea.
All right, I thought so, but then I always worry that I'm going to mess up people's names, and I always caveat it with, "Hey, I'm going to do my best, but if I mess it up, you'll have to forgive me." So I'm excited to have you on. And so I just gave a quick intro to a much longer journey, and condensed that into the 30 or 45-second version. But maybe to kick things off, tell us a little bit about how your journey got started living off the grid in a commune in Idaho.
Oh yeah, my parents were. I would say they were worried about and maybe a nuclear holocaust or something. So we had like the lifestyle that you'd want to live, maybe if you were in a zombie apocalypse. But unfortunately, there was no zombies. It was just us. I did kind of flunk out of polygamy, or in my early teens. I was just not suited. I wanted to play everybody chess and read Dostoevsky, and they were like, "You're not qualified for this lifestyle." So the community did expel me, and they were like, "You have to go to university. We don't know what you're going to do, but you can't stay here." I think universities do serve that function for a lot of kids.
Well, sounds like it was it was an interesting upbringing. Now, just out of pure curiosity, commune mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So, what was what was the commune like, or what was that? And because I getting expelled from a commune, and that is certainly an interesting start to your journey. So, give us a little bit of an idea.
Well, it's kind of mean. So I grew up a little bit fringe Mormon. So we were a little bit on the edge between like people getting excommunicated for polygamy or, political activism kind of outside the Mormon church, or like just straight mainstream Mormon. And I did stay Mormon for about 2 years after that. I didn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I ended up leaving for my own personal reasons. And I still have a lot of heart for Mormon people, Mormon families, but it wasn't for me.
That makes sense.
Interestingly, when I went to university, I needed to pay for it. And the first job that came around was a Forest Service job, fighting fire. And they were really heavily recruiting women in our area, and I could do 7 pull-ups. So I was instantly qualified. And then a lot of them were ex-convicts or gang members or foresters, very hardened loggers. I think it was primarily men for about 9 years. And so I always say that I was raised by fundamentalists and firefighters, and they balanced each other out.
Makes good sense. So now you go off and you say, okay, I'm going to become a firefighter. And so you go down that route. Now, as you're going down that route, first of all, that's interesting. I had no I have no idea what qualifications firefighters have to have, but as you go down that route, so what did you do? How long were you a firefighter? Did you go into burning buildings or go for or fight forest fires, or kind of what did you do?
Yeah, I started off in district crews in Idaho, and I ended up having a huge just love for it. I think firefighting is complex problem solving. It's also very athletic, and it's not the typical athleticism. It's like military athleticism where you have to have a lot of endurance. Um, I really like the social dynamics of the work crews, like some of the smartest people, like blue collar working class, also people that are like rebuilding their lives after gang intervention or post incarcerated will often come in, and it's you get ex-military guys, and so just really strangely competent, really bright people. I think Christopher Langan is the highest measured IQ in the world, and he did firefighting for about 12 years, as well as bartending, and he really highly recommended it as well. It's just a very fun job.
Hey, it
So I was
sounds
a
like
hot
it.
shot for a while, and then I worked in Canada.
Sounds like it was a great experience and a fun time. So now you went off and were a firefighter for a period of time. Now, how did you go from firefighting to going off to med school? Kind of fill us in on that transition.
Yeah, forest fires is a very physical job, and it's a little bit like being an athlete. Like you kind of age out, and then you're kind of like, okay, what do I do next? It has to be a second career. And so for me, I was like, I got to go back to school, and I went through the phone book looking for a job. I thought if I just go through the phone book, I'm going to see what's out there and starting all over. And I thought it'd be fun to be a family doctor in a rural town. And I was also considering college professor, but I thought medicine would have less politics, which tells you how little I knew about medicine at the time.
Well, fair enough. Well, it sounds like, it was a good opportunity. You got to just switch that up a bit. So now as you're going through that, you go off to medical school, you have that opportunity. And then, and I think when we chatted a bit before, you mentioned that, while you were going to medical school, you found out maybe you didn't fit the typical doctor mold, or maybe that was afterwards, but kind of fill us in. Cause I think there's a lot of people that you have one idealized way of what this is going to be or how it's going to work out, and then you get into it and you decide, okay, maybe it's not quite what I was thinking, and so you pivot or shift. So kind of walk us through as you're going, or how you came to that realization.
Yeah, I think when I got into medicine, I didn't have any idea what it was. I was still working class, and I didn't realize that I was going to go through a class change, because professional class and working class, I mean, they're just very different lifestyles. So there was a little bit of frustration with like how my identity had changed and how much trouble I had fitting in with my old friends. But really when it came down to is pretty much every profession has kind of boundaries around it. And the ones around medicine are basically things that have been proven for a long time. Like if you are in medicine, you're basically doing things every day that have been around for at least 20 years and have been through animal studies. And that's just kind of the rules. You can do innovative research, but the opportunity to build new things or to think creatively is pretty limited. And I think also medicine has really failed to adopt technology, and the lived reality of being a doctor nowadays is pretty distressing. Like there's they have a higher suicide rate than post-combat troops in the military. A lot of doctors are severely burnt out, and it's really just in relation to the quality of the work that they're doing right now. It's not with patients as much anymore as it is data entry.
Interesting. So now as because medical school is a pretty good feat, takes a long time, a lot of effort, and you get through that. Now as you're kind of coming out and you're saying, okay, I'm coming out of medical school and I've got to figure out what I want to do with this. Kind of how did you figure out what you were going to do, or what that next step was, or kind of how did you figure out the direction you were going to go?
It was really hard actually. There's a huge amount of societal investment in being a doctor. So when you get that degree, the society that you live in and came from has put that money forward to train you. And to not do that is a big deal. And so for me, what really happened was I was super torn for a really long time. My aptitudes were definitely more in R&D and development and technology, but my interests, were in surgery and very kinesthetic patient care. And it got to the point where it was just one or the other. Like you're going to do surgery and you're going to work 18-hour days for the next 12 years, and you're really going to dedicate yourself to this craft, or you're going to be working on R&D and you're going to be working maybe the same hours, but with a totally different work lifestyle. So I wouldn't say I work any less hard in high tech than I did in surgery, but simply the cognitive work is less strain for me. I'm not doing the same thing every day. I probably do too many new things every day, but that's where I'm better suited. So that's what I ended up doing. Also for me in medicine, you deal with so much downstream stuff, you know, people at the end of their life or people who've been kind of victims of civilization in any way, you know, like diabetes or obesity or drug addiction. All these things are kind of like the downstream effects of where our species is at. And I got more and more interested in like, what should we do? Like blue zones of health and like preventing disease and all that's outside of medicine. And I finally realized the more I followed my interests, the more I was in many ways leaving the structure of medicine, living the care of disease, and more focused on health.
So now you see, and that makes sense. So now you come to that realization, you say, okay, you know, and I have, you know, maybe a similar, it stayed in the legal atmosphere, or, you know, and I still continue to practice in the legal arena. But on the other hand, I've always felt like, you know, there are things that I don't like about other law firms or how they're run or, you know, how they're set up. And there's a lot of opportunity to adjust and do other things and improve or make it better. And so as you were doing that and kind of, you know, figuring that out and kind of figuring out the direction to head, I think, you know, or walk us through a little bit as to what was that kind of the next step of the journey, or kind of what did you decide to do as you were making that pivot or that switch a bit?
Well, initially I decided to do a year in Stanford and in Silicon Valley working in technology. And I thought it'd be a year, I'll go back to medicine. But that's not what I found. I found it was nearly impossible to go back to medicine after leaving for the year. Doctors were just really not happy with the idea that I'd run off to high tech, and they didn't really have a lot of respect for the skills that I gained in technology. So I spent the next 3 or 4 years trying to get back into a residency. And to do that, I was paying my way. And, you know, everybody's story, you can focus on the high points and things that sound smart, but the reality is it's a lot of failure. And I felt like a huge failure. I was going city to city doing surgical residencies, and I started consulting on the side to pay my way. And so I ended up consulting in high tech, academia, R&D for like 8 different disciplines. I think I was working in nuclear power. At one point I was working in like nuclear power, the microbiome, preventative medicine, like high tech development, like launching startups. And it was just like, and then I realized, heck, I'm doing the same thing and I'm really good at it. I should just go do that. So that's when I launched my company. And at the time I thought, this is so stupid. I didn't even consider myself a business owner for the first 5 years, really. It was just kind of something I did on the side that started to grow and grow and grow. And then people started to come, and then we started doing more and more elite. I would say, yeah, I would say elite. A lot of people started to consult us that had really big names on the front of their building, but inside they didn't have innovation. And we were pulling high IQ people from different parts of society. So like working moms that were at home with young children, post-incarcerated people. I think I had a couple of street kids from Ukraine and Uganda, like just people that were just not being considered as talent. And because we just considered them as talent, we were able to pull that really amazing and under-resourced human intelligence.
Interesting. No, I think that's an interesting direction to go. And sounds like, you know, after going back and forth through a few different options and opportunities and exploring things, you started to settle in on what you enjoyed and what you wanted to do. So now you got into, you know, so you went through that kind of understanding, and you worked with, I think you started working for, you know, some med tech businesses and doing that. Now walk us through a little bit. How did you get into consulting, and how did you kind of arrive at what you're doing today?
Yeah, I mean, at first we were just kind of doing some of the academic work for Stanford and Harvard, and we didn't have degrees. We were just kind of closing like postdoc paperwork or graduate degrees for like filling the gap between the graduate students and what the professor needed. So we were doing that for a little bit, and then we started to just put out our shingle on Upwork, I think, at first, and then the clients and the gigs got bigger and bigger, and we just went independent. At that point, we were kind of hiring word of mouth, and after a while, we were able to start picking our clients. And when I say we went from me in front of a laptop in the evenings to about 300 people who are high IQ all over the world, 27 countries. I think we have 15 languages represented right now. And we started tackling stuff. Sometimes our consults would come in from other people, but a lot of times we would be consulting for 2 or 3 groups, and we'd be like, wow, there's really this gap. And we started to create our own companies from that. So we were really careful to like keep IP where it belonged, but there's gaps between the IP. And if you're working for a lot of different people, you start to see what's not getting addressed. And that's also valuable, the whole.
Hmm. So now walk us through, because I mean, going from doing it as almost, I would say, kind of a side hustle, or getting it going, second full-time job or whatever you want to call it, nights and weekends, to building out the team and having, 300 plus experts and people that assist with things. Walk us through kind of over what period of time did that occur?
Oh, wow. I would say it's about 10 years total. And I think it was really severely hamstrung by the fact that I didn't consider myself the kind of person that could have a business. I don't know if it's how I grew up or the society I lived in or whatever, but like it really took me almost 7 years to say, yeah, I'm a business owner. I'm a serial entrepreneur. That's what I do. It just didn't occur to me. And I think we had our first, 6-figure company before I realized, oh shit, I'm a business owner. That's what I do for a living now. I still feel embarrassed telling people I'm self-employed.
No,
I actually employ about 100 people right now, nearly full time. And when I told somebody the other day I was self-employed, I just thought, oh, they're never going to believe me.
No, it is interesting to see. I don't know, a stigmatism or just people, and whenever if you work for someone else and you can say, hey, I have this type of job, then it's a pretty commonplace. And yet there's always a different reaction when you get into I'm self-employed, or I own a business, or I run a business, and people just are always tend to view that a bit differently. But it's always an interesting thing to address. And so now walk us through. So you went through, you started out as an individual, built a team over 10 years. You guys are up at a head count of 300 or more, and taking on a lot of different projects. So where do you kind of see the business headed? What's the next 6 to 12 months look like for you guys?
Yeah. Okay. So I stumbled on like the best thing I've ever done in my life, and I can't be happier. So we had a company during Hollywood. We were doing COVID testing for Hollywood. So they hired us to see if they get their test results back faster. I think back then they were getting their test results back in 3 to 7 days. And we got the first one back in 6 hours. And every producer in Hollywood called us like the next month. And we went from 0 to 300 people in 6 months in 2 countries. So that was crazy. We always knew that was a short-term business. And I don't think any of us took it that seriously in terms of longevity. But we banked the money. And then after that, we took about a year to look for a better project because we could finally self-fund. And it's, as a single female entrepreneur, it's very hard to get investment funding. So we finally had the money to go do something cool. And I was on Walkabout, and we went to Dubai, Thailand, and I was in Latin America. And 2 people consulted me at once. Dubai, or ex-McKinsey, called me to see if I could measure consciousness with a biometric. And then 5 medicine doctors in the Colombian Amazon called to see if we could get them into the climate market, the carbon market. And we were like, oh, McKinsey's going to be the better client. But actually, the Colombian medicine doctors were by far the better client when we looked at it. So we came and we made a company with them. We call it Savimbo. It's very much, my 2 co-founders are a 3rd-generation Colombian Taita medicine doctor, and then a 20-year conservationist. He used to work kind of like for the World Wildlife Fund as a jaguar tracker. And then he realized, man, I'm not getting any money out of this. He was getting paid like $12 a month, I think. And for videos that had 40,000 views. And I just really, and so I was like, why don't we just do something together? We will see how far we get. And it has so much market potential. I can't get over it. Like, I think what it is 80% of the biodiversity on the planet is owned by indigenous peoples, but virtually none of them are represented directly on the carbon market. So we were like, this would be kind of fun. Like, can we make software that indigenous peoples want to use in their language, facilitating their workflow? And it's about a 1 billion person market that's really never been addressed before, this small farmer market.
Well, it sounds like it's a great opportunity, a lot of potential, and a lot of or paths that you can take on it. So it sounds like it is a fun direction to continue to be headed in and to continue to grow into. So, well, now as we wrap towards kind of caught up to the present day and wrap towards the end of the episode, I always like to wrap up each journey with a couple of questions. So we'll jump to those now. So the first question I always like to ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made? What'd you learn from it?
Wow. I think consistently with my businesses, it's been hiring my friends. Like, most of the people who work at our company, they don't know me as a friend. And so, it's easier, but like when you hire a friend, it's really hard for them to respect you as a boss because they know what a jackass you are. I'm not saying my staff doesn't know what a jackass I am. They just, it's just a different relationship. And so it's really hard to get a friend who's a friend first and then works at business. Most of the people who've been in and out of our business have become friends over the years. So yeah, I think, what did I learn from that? I learned that it's really hard to have faith in yourself sometimes, especially with the people that know you the most. And when you're leading a company, at the end of the day, especially an early stage company where the company is very reliant on you, you just have to keep reinvesting back in yourself. Even if it's the wrong decision, like even if you tank your business, if you don't invest in yourself, it's bad for the company too.
No, I definitely think that makes sense. And a great one, it's always hard to, as you get, build up the business, as you bring people on, the keeping the distinction between the boss and making decisions and guiding the company and becoming their friend and getting to know them. And it is one of those where it provides a lot of good teamwork and synergies, but it also gives you presents or the potential for an issue of or managing those various relationships. So definitely easy mistake to make, but a great one to learn from. Second question now that I always ask.
Especially when you're a new business owner. Your family, if you're in a business owner, your family's like, you're not a CEO. Like, you were just mucking out my garage last week because you were dead broke. Like, why am I going to listen to you? But like, you do kind of have to just be like, okay, you know what? Like, in this situation, I am. But yeah.
No, I definitely agree with that and makes perfect sense. So second question now that I always ask is, now if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Wow. Okay. So, I think one of my biggest pieces of advice is, start small. So we have it on my wall and we tell it to everybody at the company. So it's think big, start small, grow fast. A lot of what makes early businesses successful is the ability to just build what you need at the time and then be willing to go back and get rid of it and start over. And you got to think, I always think about, people or humans, the first month of a human's life, it looks very different than the second 6 months. And then after that, if you're middle-aged and you add another 6 months on, you're not going to change a lot. And that happens for businesses too. But for a small business, 6 months is night and day. And if you keep the resources proportionate to the size of the business, it's a lot easier to stay afloat. Like it's very hard to keep a business successful through the first year. And much harder than the 20th. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. And I think that's a great piece of advice and a great takeaway. So, well, now as we wrap up, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Oh, okay. So we love friends. I have this bucket of like friends. Speaking of friends, we actually have a ton of friends, and friends make the business. So, Sabimbo is a really cool company, and I think what's cool about it is it's both doing good and it has financial sustainability, and that's pretty rare to find. So our company's just been gotten hugely ahead by people who are just like, I like this idea, I like what you're doing. So you can be a friend. If you want to be our client, yes, please. You can subscribe to Johnny's Jaguar. You can buy a biodiversity credit and change the entire global market because it's way cooler than carbon. You can also buy a fair trade carbon credit, which is also cooler than most carbon. And then you can also buy a tree, a sexy tree, and we'll plant it. But if you go to the website and sign up, we'll send you a sexy tree once a week. They are incredibly sexy. Don't get me wrong, that's true. And then as far as growers, if you have a project and you want to get into the carbon market, especially if you're an indigenous group, come talk to us. We will definitely help you out.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, make a new connection, support a great business. If nothing else, make a new best friend. So thank you again for coming on the podcast. Now for all of you listeners that are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. So let's go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. Couple more things as listeners, make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review. Helps us to reach even more startups and small businesses to help them along their journey to success. And with that, if along your journey you ever need help with patents, trademarks, or anything else with your startup or your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Well, thank you again, Drea, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thanks, Devin.